la hija de la Sargasaki.
Oye, vos, hocico de M16, hocico de metralleta, te bajo por el esperma más hueón, más chazado que tengo. Soy puro hueón, vos, pedazo de hueón.
Put a finger down, ADHD edition. Wait, what was I doing? I'll do it again for you. Wait, what was I doing?
No.
Sorry, what did you say? Oh, no, I still didn't hear you, sorry. Yeah, say that again. No, yeah. No, I didn't hear you again, sorry.
I can't believe it.
My God, where's my phone? Where are my keys? Car, book, glasses.
They're glorifying mental illness again. How could they? Did we learn nothing from Tumblr?
Do you want to play a game?
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Concerning Content. Today, as you saw in the intro sequence, we'll be talking about ADHD related videos on TikTok, how this trend even came to be in the first place, how it's dangerous for those involved, how it's harmful for those actually affected by ADHD, and of course, I will also be talking about my own personal experience with ADHD at the end of the video. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned to the end. Like everything terrible and catastrophic in recent memory, aside maybe from this channel's very creation, this trend too found its origin during the recent pandemic. With many people being stuck at home, a lot of them decided to pick up content creation as a new hobby. And TikTok, being the most easily accessible and newest social media platform at the time, was the go-to choice for many. Due to this huge influx of content available online, many online communities grew at an unprecedented rate, and ADHD awareness arguably grew more than most others. During the height of this trend, it was almost impossible not to come across at least one or two ADHD-related videos while browsing TikTok for more than 15 minutes at a time. While this doesn't sound all that bad at first, I mean, after all these people really do is provide helpful coping strategies for those affected and destigmatize a very much misunderstood disorder. Well, it didn't take very long until people started realizing that if they made their content very simple and appealing to a very broad audience of people, it would be more successful in the TikTok algorithm. This allowed the trend to climb even further, and TikTok accounts whose entire branding was based around ADHD started popping up left, right, and center. Due to the simple nature of ADHD content at this point, many people who consumed ADHD content and didn't have ADHD themselves all of a sudden found a sense of relatability when consuming ADHD content. This resulted in people who did not have ADHD thinking that they may have ADHD going down the ADHD rabbit hole on TikTok, which now mainly consisted of people who were in no way, shape or form qualified to give advice, giving advice, and people who were trying to romanticize the disorder by adding different weird, quirky symptoms. One of these symptoms being object permanence, which, by the way, mind you, is not a real thing. And this brings us to where we are today. Easily the worst trend to come out of all of this is the 5 or 10 signs that you have ADHD. This trend usually simplifies ADHD symptoms to a point where anybody can relate to them. So let's take a look at one of those and see just why exactly this trend is as dumb as it is.
Signs you may have ADHD.
At this point, there is quite a few people that know that people would rather harm themselves than be bored for an extended period of time. So I feel like this not only applies to people with ADHD, but everybody else. Probably 90% of people, if not 100%. But no, you don't like waiting? Well, you have ADHD. As a person with ADHD, we struggle with time management. Yes, we work faster, that's for sure, but it's also not exclusive to people with ADHD. It's actually a survival instinct that allowed our ancestors to instantly react in case a threat showed up. Let's say you're in the bush and with your homies and you're hunting a mammoth, ooga ooga, and all of a sudden this massive tiger jumps out the bush. Well, you better react quickly, otherwise you're dead. And that's what that is. You work fast under pressure because you have to, because it's instinct, not because you have ADHD. And it's ridiculous to imply human nature is ADHD. In 2013, an analyst by the name of Frederick Conrad gathered 204 people in order to discover and understand people's listening habits. 86% admitted to at least listening to their favorite song once a week, while
43%
admitted to doing so daily. Out of all of these people, 60% admitted to listening to their favorite songs 4 or more times in a row. This doesn't really surprise me. After all, music is a very emotional thing, and once we feel that we are understood by somebody or something, a piece of art, whatever it may be, anything really, we are more prone to spend time with that person or to appreciate that piece of art more and consuming that kind of art more. So it's only natural. But to further prove my point, in the years 2011 all the way to the end of 2013, only 9.5% of all children were diagnosed with ADHD, which is, a whole lot less than 60% of all people. So yet again, bullshit. While zoning out is very prevalent in those with ADHD, it's not exclusive to people with ADHD either. People can zone out for a number of reasons. It could be insomnia, stress, and even trauma. So implying that 3 basic human traits and one that is not exclusive to ADHD equals ADHD. It just shows you how dumb these videos really are. Thanks to my 20 minutes of internet journalism, we now know that this video is complete bullshit. But somebody who got served this video on their TikTok For You page would not know that. They wouldn't bother fact checking because they're not on TikTok in order to find shit out. They're on TikTok to pass time, and so they take this as fact. And this reflects in the comment section of this video. While there is people that do recognize the faulty logic in this video, there is a majority of people that echo similar phrases to "I have ADHD," and unfortunately, this isn't exclusive to this video. Most ADHD related content on TikTok has the same kind of phrase in its comment section. "I have ADHD," or "I think I have ADHD." Well, no, you don't. And to me, an outsider looking in, it may as well be, I got the wrong idea about a very serious disorder, and that in combination with my very weak sense of identity led me to believe that I may now have a disorder, which I don't even fully understand thanks to TikTok's algorithm. Unfortunately, it's not only insensitive to appropriate somebody else's struggles as your own, but also very dangerous, especially if you're talking about ADHD. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you yourself are in that ADHD vortex on TikTok, and a video is recommended to you of somebody implying that insomnia, inattention, and depressive episodes are strong indicators of ADHD. You'd probably believe them. I mean, why would they lie to you? After all, only 52% of all ADHD-related content on TikTok is false or misleading, and 27% are personal experiences, while a whole 21% are actually factual. Now that I told you that, you probably won't be surprised when I tell you that these symptoms in combination are a bigger indicator of major depression rather than actual ADHD. But if I hadn't told you that, how would you know? You wouldn't do your research. I mean, it just takes way too long. Now let's assume further and say that these symptoms apply to you. You watch the video and think to yourself, after seeing so many ADHD videos I can relate to, I think I may have ADHD. So you begin researching ADHD. You begin researching what the disorder really is all about. And because you already convinced yourself that you have ADHD, or rather TikTok convinced you that you have ADHD, confirmation bias kicks in. After a quick visit to Dr. Google, this belief is totally solidified and you 100% believe you have ADHD. So then there's 2 likely scenarios that might happen. In the best case scenario, you go see a psychologist in your area and they will confirm to you that you don't actually have ADHD. There is a possibility that you just parrot whatever you read online and you still get the diagnosis, but a psychologist is especially trained for these kind of things, so that shouldn't happen. In the second and worst case scenario, you visit a websites such as Done ADHD, who pride themselves on a diagnosis and a prescription in under an hour. This whole idea seems kind of shady to me because usually there is a number of tests that are done on a person in order to determine whether or not they have ADHD. Then again, I am no expert on psychological evaluation, so don't take my word for it. I do, however, want to add that Done ADHD is infamous for trying to threaten people into removing negative reviews. After finding that out, I personally don't think Done ADHD is the most credible way of getting a diagnosis. So yeah, I have my personal bias against services such as Done ADHD. All these factors just seem kind of suspicious to me. That doesn't mean that they don't work, I just personally don't think they're very effective. effective. With me having this negative outlook on done ADHD, it's unfortunate to think about that people who think they have ADHD thanks to TikTok would probably choose them over an actual psychologist. This is not because most people would prefer quick and easy diagnosis, but because I've actually seen people in the ADHD sphere who have a certain level of influence have done ADHD's website linked in their bio. I don't know if this has anything to do with them being paid for this, but it does leave a sour taste in my mouth. With me saying all this, you may be wondering, Oscar, why are you so against people who don't have ADHD getting their hands on medication for those with ADHD? In order to treat ADHD medicinally, one uses one of three main medications: Adderall, the most famous one, Ritalin, or Concerta. I myself use Ritalin. The active ingredient in Ritalin is methylphenidate, and yes, that's meth as in meth. These medications are very strong stimulants and work very heavy on the mind. They're so strong, in fact, they were used by World War II soldiers in order to stay up during guard shifts. And while these medications help people like me to stay productive, they unfortunately can have an adverse reaction for somebody who may be emotionally unstable. For example, people with psychoactive disorders would experience crazy fits, while those with anxiety disorders would not be able to function in the first place. These medications are dangerous for those emotionally vulnerable. And that's not even talking about how highly addictive this medication can be when abused. ADHD is a disorder that inhibits executive function, while the other two that I just mentioned are inhibiting in an emotional sense. And while these medications help those that are struggling with executive functions, the side effects are extremely destructive to somebody's emotional well-being. Some of these side effects are stomach pains, loss of appetite, weight loss, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, headaches, and even psychosis. Those are only a few examples. Some people with ADHD hate these medications, but are not able to function or get their life in order without them. There is a reason why 77% of people drop their medication for weeks at a time, even months, and I myself have dropped them for years. And if we dread taking this medication as much as we do, imagine how much somebody with an anxiety disorder would suffer while taking them. Hey guys, so as you can tell, my camera died as my friends came by, so I spent some time with them as the camera charged, and yeah, now I'm back. So that explains the change of lighting. It's late evening now already. And the amount of people that went down this ADHD wormhole is insane. There is so many of them out there. And I wonder how many of them actually suffer from anxiety. And I wonder how many of them actually have a psychoactive disorder, but they think it's ADHD. So in an effort to treat their ADHD, they start doing ADHD medication. And this only worsens their condition over time. And this is all thanks to TikTok. And that's why self-diagnosing yourself with ADHD is so incredibly dangerous. But this trend isn't just dangerous for those that self-diagnose, it's also incredibly harmful for those that are actually diagnosed and for those that are going to be diagnosed in the future. ADHD always had a lot of negative stigmas surrounding it. A lot of people will say things such as it's caused by kids eating too much sugar, bad parenting, or even electronics being used at a young age, when this couldn't be further from the truth, obviously. But it doesn't stop there. It gets worse. Some people actually believe that ADHD isn't real. When I was a kid, I wanted to Google if ADHD is hereditary, because my mother told me something like that. I just wanted to make sure to see if it's actually true. And when I typed the words, "is ADHD?" Google recommended real before anything else. This was of course before this whole TikTok trend took form. Now when you Google it, you get totally different results. But yeah, that just shows you how many people actually believe that ADHD is a lie. People with ADHD hear similar phrases all around the globe, the main two of which being, you have so much potential if you applied yourself. And of course, don't we all have a little bit of ADHD? Our struggles are usually blatantly disregarded by most people that we meet. And that sucks. And I could give you so many examples of this happening to me, but I think you get the point. And as I'm telling you about people not believing in ADHD's very existence, you may be thinking, well, Oscar, isn't ADHD awareness on TikTok a good thing for people with ADHD then? I mean, in the future, there won't be people that doubt its very existence. Well, this is only partially true, unfortunately. You see, the thing with TikTok's gross simplification of ADHD, and I mean gross, disgusting, rotten to a mere character trait anybody can pick up, is a beast with two heads. On one hand, you have people that are just self-diagnosing and potentially causing a lot of damage to their future mental health. On the other, you have people that don't have ADHD and don't self-diagnose as ADHD. Their first encounter with somebody telling them about ADHD, somebody relating basic human instinct to ADHD, they will believe that ADHD can't possibly be all that bad because, quite frankly, everybody experiences these things. And while their logic is not faulty at all, these TikToks made it so easy for them to assume that ADHD is nothing more than a mindset, nothing more than people who have no discipline, much like the people who don't believe that ADHD is real in the first place. TikTok essentially reinforces that stereotype of don't we all have a little ADHD? And unfortunately, this idea will shape future generations of people and their opinion on ADHD. And all of this mess is only occurring because some people wanted to take the attention that people with ADHD need from those that don't have it and take it for themselves in order to boost their ego and make money doing so. I'm pretty sure that those responsible for what I'm talking about are not watching, not only because I'm a small channel, but quite frankly, who wants to watch some kid on the internet with a microphone and an editing program critique their livelihoods? I'm sure there's no one out there, but I really hope that they are still here, because there is one more point that I wanted to talk about, and that is my own personal experience with ADHD. And while this next part of the video will be more emotional and it may seem as though I am looking for your pity or your sympathy, I want you to know that that is not the case. Quite the opposite. I just want to show the world that ADHD is not as romantic or as cool and hip as TikTok makes it out to be to some people, and that it's also not something to just be brushed under the rug by those that believe ADHD is just a mindset. I was diagnosed with ADHD in grade 1. After my teacher recommended my mother should get me checked. Right after receiving my diagnosis, my mother and I would start going to a different city so that I would receive therapy for my ADHD. This would be my first, but definitely not last, experience with mental health professionals trying to help me. During the first few years of my school career, everything was more or less fine. Unfortunately, all of that came to a rather sudden stop as soon as I entered grade 5. In grade 5, the school expected us to be a lot more independent than before, and I started encountering my first major struggles with ADHD. I started falling behind on homework and I started failing my first classes. This was also around the time that I first heard the phrase, "You have so much potential, you just have to apply yourself." Unless you're watching this and you know me personally and quite well at that, you won't know that I actually grew up in a hostel. This is because my mother worked far away from the city that I was in order to attend school. The people that also worked at the hostel were very accommodating and helped me in a lot of ways when it came to my ADHD, at least when my struggles were still in their infancy. During my 6th year at school, and I think I must have been seeing my 4th or 5th psychologist at this time, I was prescribed medication in order to cope with my ADHD. This medication being Concerta. And it helped in the beginning. I myself didn't really notice a change in trying, if you will, but my teachers told me it helped, so must have helped. But as I told you earlier, medication for ADHD usually has quite severe side effects. And these medications affected me in such a way where I was barely able to socialize, and I'd spend pretty much all of my free time that wasn't dedicated to doing homework, catching up on school and all of that, laying in my bed and just rotting away, if you will. I don't remember if I took Concerta for a couple months, for a year, or even more than that. But I do remember that after a while, my dosage was being pumped up and up and up. And even though this was happening, my teachers were complaining again. And this, in addition to me just not coping well with the medication, led to me dropping it again. And even though my teachers were complaining when I was on the medication, as soon as I got off Concerta, I started to give them a real reason to complain. Shortly after dropping Concerta, I was behind on 6 weeks of homework and my grades were plummeting once more. I have a very clear memory of one of the ladies that worked at the hostel and always took care of our age group, and me sitting there for 2 days straight trying to catch up on the homework. And to your and my surprise, I actually caught up, and I have to admit I was rather proud of myself at the time, and so was she. But unfortunately, and as much as I am ashamed to say this, a few weeks later I'd be back in the same shit. I'd have weeks worth of homework on my back and no ambition to do them at all. So yeah, that's around the time this lady gave up on me, and to this day, it kind of haunts me and I feel like I disappointed her in a lot of ways. So if you're watching this, Mrs. R, I don't want to say your full name because YouTube this, that. I guess I'm sorry. Thanks for trying. all of these things that were, happening in my life at the same time, and school pushing down harder on me than ever before, I got really depressed, much more depressed than any 13-year-old should be. What followed was one of the darkest times in my life, and probably the darkest that I experienced up until this point. It went so far that I even had attempts on my own life. I have memories climbing buildings so that I could throw myself off the roof, and I remember a very specific incident where I tried suffocating myself by spraying deodorant down my throat. None of my classmates knew what I was going through at the time, and up until recently I thought my mother did, but it turns out that the hostel actually never notified about any of this. Homework just kept piling and stressing me out, and I remember going to extra classes where this woman, I don't want to say her name obviously, but I kind of hated her, man. She kept telling me, Oscar, just focus. And I remember thinking, bitch, I am. I was trying, man. It's not like I wasn't. It was just really hard. And it seemed like nobody understood what I was going through at the time. And it seemed like nobody believed that I was going through it either, which made it all considerably worse. Teachers, people at the hostel, and even my psychologists were giving up on me. It got so bad that even I gave up on myself. All along, my grades just kept plummeting. And that's when we moved. We moved twice actually in 1 year. Continents as well. So not just from one city to the next, but rather from one place in the world to another and back again. After moving back to the country that we had just moved out of less than a year ago at this point, I didn't attend the same school for the first year that I was back. My friend's father actually started a homeschool, and my mother thought, due to my ADHD, it might be the best option for me. I don't want to say the school didn't work, but it didn't work for me. The teacher wasn't bad either. My friend's father is one of the smartest people that I know, and he is the one that actually got me interested in politics for the first time. But yeah, that's besides the fact. After 1 year, said friend and his family moved continent, and I went back to my old school. Unfortunately, when I came back, things picked up worse than I had left them off. Because I moved schools for 4 times, if you count it all, in less than 3 years, I had missed out on some very important things, such as basic algebra. I know some of you are gonna laugh, and go ahead, honestly, laugh at my expense. I don't give a shit. This, of course, didn't make school very easy. Math, which was already the bane of my existence before I moved schools, was hell on earth. And that's no exaggeration. I never understood anything that was going on. This also translated to other classes. As a result of, a low self-esteem and not really seeing my place in this world, I started smoking weed. And while it was fun at first, it probably was one of the most damaging things that I could have done to my school career. Long story short, throughout the rest of my school career, I didn't give much of a shit, and I finished with worse marks than you can probably imagine. Studying was never really an option for me, for 2 reasons that is. First one being my marks, and the second one being I knew for a fact that I didn't want to go back to school. So after finishing school, I had to do something with myself. So I'd start a waitering job at a restaurant. And I'm not gonna lie, the restaurant was visited by a lot of upper class folks, if you know what I mean. So tip was good, pay was but the tip was really good. After about 5 months of working at a restaurant, COVID came about and I lost my job as a result. Thanks to this, I went into a bit of an existential crisis. I couldn't find a new job anyway, and after a while, I just started feeling that I was a good for nothing who had failed everybody that had tried helping me in the past. And that, of course, fucked with my self-esteem even more. I started smoking a lot more. I smoked chronically, meaning that I smoked at least once every day, if not more. I wouldn't do much either. I'd just sit around a table with a couple friends, listen to some music, and smoke the day away. This would continue for, I think, about 1.5 years, until, by chance actually, I met an elderly man at the beach, totally high by the way. I was stoned out of my mind while this was happening, who approached me and my friends and offered one of us a job, who then declined the job because he already had a job. But then he pointed at me and said, "Hey, I think that guy needs a job, and without thinking twice, I took the offer. This new job of mine actually helped me build up my confidence to a certain degree. Not because I was excelling at it, to be honest with you, I wasn't even really trying at first. But every little step that I took to, become a better employee, I guess, my boss celebrated with me as if it were a huge leap in progress for humankind. He didn't know about how much of a disappointment I was. And even when he found out through being friends with one of my old teachers, he didn't stop believing in me, despite knowing how much of a failure I was. And this helped. I know this was probably just him being nice, but it was the first time that somebody had actually believed in me in years. And this made me feel as though there is still hope, I guess. I don't know, as if I can still do certain things right. I still work at this place, by the way, and I have quite a close relationship with my boss. I shared my vices with him, and I told him about my struggles with weed. He encouraged me to drop weed, and because he was the one saying it, I tried. I tried about 3 or 4 times until I actually got it right. And because I don't want to lie to you and be completely honest with my viewers, I do still smoke. I smoke once every 2 weeks once I finish a video. It's not to an unhealthy degree anymore. And I'm very grateful for that. The story does get happy towards the end. Thanks to my newfound confidence, I also started treating my ADHD again. And in order to not make a waste of it, I also started a video editing course online so that I could pursue my childhood dream of being a YouTuber. By the way, subscribe and make that dream become a reality, I guess. Anyways, I started doing medication about 4 months ago, and I started my course a week later. Ever since then, I've published a total of 5 videos, and you've helped me build my confidence even more. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something well and I'm good at something. I don't want to suck up to you guys this much, but you don't understand how much your support actually means. I know every YouTuber says this, but seeing these amazing comments of people saying like, oh, Curtis Connor vibes, and I'm like, oh, I love Curtis, man. Thanks, bro. And saying stuff like, you deserve more subscribers. It feels good to finally feel like you're good at something. And I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm the greatest YouTuber of all time, or that I'm even a good one. I personally don't think so, but I do put a lot of effort into this, and the effort is paying off, and that's really nice to see. Thanks to my ADHD, I've always had, problems picking something up and then just dropping it again. And 1.5 months is a really, really good run for me. Better than anything I can remember, to be honest with you. So yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. I know this doesn't seem genuine enough and all that, and I don't know. I just wish I could tell you guys with words just how thankful I really am. But yeah, let's move on. My mom, who, by the way, is crazy supportive with all of this and watches every single one of my videos, by the way. Hi, Mama. She told me that she's proud of me. I think it was about a week ago or so. And for the first time in my life, or years rather, I don't want to say my life, but for the first time in years, I believed her. And I'm also proud of myself. That's a surreal feeling. So yeah, there's your happy ending to this whole ADHD thing. I know that I didn't go in depth on the symptoms of ADHD, and I didn't really want to be honest with you. There is so many videos out there that do that, and I just wanted to share my story in order to show people that ADHD is real and that ADHD is difficult to deal with. That being said, I think my story makes it very evident that ADHD can lead to very poor mental health. ADHD is a monster that I've been fighting my entire life, and I will be fighting the entirety of it until I die, which is exactly why it upsets me so much that this disorder is being dragged through the mud by people on TikTok, and why I made this video in the first place. From a person with ADHD to the people creating pseudoscience ADHD related videos on TikTok, which we discussed is the vast majority of ADHD content. Fuck you, my disorder is not your rise to 15 seconds of internet fame. Get your own personality and stop using my disorder as if it were a ball of clay that you can just form around in order to create an internet persona to make you fun, quirky, or even relatable, just for you to drop it as soon as the next big trend arrives. In conclusion, ADHD content is extremely dangerous to those involved in the community, and of course those that have ADHD and will have ADHD in the future. I hope that by sharing my own story, I could show you that ADHD is a very real problem and that it's not something to be taken lightly. Now that all of that has been said, thank you guys for coming by. I appreciated you hanging out with me. It's been fun. Can't wait to see you again. Subscribe to win a UFO. Leave a like if you did, leave a comment if you didn't, and describe why you didn't. Thank you guys, and until next time. Cheers. It's been great.